Hello and welcome to Z News on yet another episode of Aviation Talk. And joining me today is Shrenik Ghodawat, Director at Star Air. Mr. Ghodawat, welcome and thanks for talking to Z News.
Thank you, Arjun. Thank you for having me.
If you can tell me the story of Star Air, why and when was the airline established?
So I think Star Air started with a dream. It was a passion project of our chairman, Mr. Sanjay Ghodawat. He himself is a trained pilot on fixed wing and rotary. The objective was very clear. We saw a big white space available within the Tier 3, Tier 4 and Tier 5 connectivity. Objective was to continue to focus on connecting these smaller places to one metro city. And everybody says that when you want to do something, universe conspires. I think that's when the Udan scheme was launched by government under the regional connectivity scheme. And that sort of propelled the entire growth and journey of Star Air, right from humble beginnings of just 2 aircrafts and 6 flights a day, today to about 7 operating aircrafts and 26 flights a day. So that's been the journey of Star Air. We are today connecting close to about 18 destinations in India. And the objective will be to continue to focus on connecting more and more underserved or unserved airports of India.
Just tell me about the airline's fleet and what planes are you using and what's the rationale behind using those planes?
So when we started doing the identification of aircraft type that we wanted to bring in India, there are not a lot of options available which can fly in Indian terrain. You either have the Airbus or Boeings, which majorly take care of the entire share. But when we started speaking to a lot of regional airlines, we realized that Embraer is a very good aircraft, which we wanted to focus on. And when we met the Embraer team, they were equally excited about the project. They also wanted to get back into India. And the ideation, the thought processes, the aircraft type, the seating of no middle seat, all of those started, becoming the USP for us when we started building the fleet. So today, when we started with the ERJ 145, which are the 50-seater aircrafts, jet, we are the only operator in India for them now. And similarly, our digression from the ERJ's 145 to the E175s, which is a 76-seater with a dual class configuration of 12 business and 64 economy. So going forward, I think we feel that in the rural ecosystem, both these aircraft types are well suited to cater to that requirement. And we will continue to invest behind these type of aircrafts.
How do you choose a route? As in, if there is no other competition available on that route and there's a demand, or do you think that there's a pre-existing, say, a set of airlines that are already flying on that route, but then there's a huge demand, say, from the tourist point of view or from college or, say, a business hub point of view? So how do you choose exactly a network?
So I think the first thought process when we are choosing a network is we look at the population and we look at the spend power of that particular population. I think that's very important to understand. So when we are looking at a base or looking at a city of expansion. Number 2, I think we also see the point A to point B study in terms of traffic. How many buses, how many trains, how many cars actually travel from point A to point B. That's a very important matrix for us to study. Most of the routes where we are operating today are exclusive to us because of Udan. And even the non-exclusive ones, we are looking at not more than 1 or 2 aircrafts or aircraft types flying on those particular routes. So going forward also, our network strategy, our plan is not to compete with any of the larger airlines. It's to compete with the trains and buses.
Airline business, by the virtue of it, is dependent on a lot of things. One, we have seen in the case of Go First about how the engine maker created some sort of trouble. It's also dependent on the plane provider, the manufacturer of the plane, which in your case is Embraer. Then there's also government in play because the policies are largely decided by the government. Then you have the infrastructure wherein you need those parking slots in the airports across India. So it's not a standalone business kind of situation. You have to deal with multiple parties at one go, and customers are like somewhat at the last stage of that step. So how do you shield yourself in such a scenario wherein there is such a dynamic situation taking place every day in the Indian or say the global aviation industry?
Yeah. So I think to answer your question in a simple term, I think no business today in India is very simple, right? Or no business anywhere in the world is simple. while I don't disagree to the fact that aviation is one of the most regulated industry in the world and probably the most difficult to succeed into, but at the same time, it solves the biggest question that any business has, which is demand. Today, if you look at India, the demand versus supply gap is so skewed that for the next 10 years or 15 years, even if all the aircraft orders that are there today come inside, we will still have room for more. And that is what is the only driving objective that we have. That if you look at the GDP growth, if you look at the per capita income, which is growing in the rural population as well, all of that is going to be spent on minimizing the time loss, because time is the only finite thing that we have, right? So, and that is the objective, and that's the principle which we are playing on. Only 5% of unique Indians fly today, right? Versus if you look at US, it's about 75%, and in China, it's about 60%. So the headspace for growth of Indian aviation is phenomenal. Every business has its own challenges. Every business has its own, hindrances, obstacles that come in. But I think the most important aspect is to look at the demand versus supply gap, and which is where we are very robust in our thinking and thought process, that this is the space to be in for the next 3 to 5 years, and that is how it is going to boom.
And lastly, how do you see this Udan scheme, the Ude Desh Ka Aam Nagrik scheme by the Indian government? Because as far as I know, and we discussed it earlier, that aviation was somewhat inaccessible to common people, but with this scheme, it has become accessible to most of the peoples across the India. How do you see this scheme?
I think it's a fantastic scheme. What government has done is they have thought through a lot of things. If you look at from Udan 1 to Udan 5, which is now recently announced, there have been so many airports that had one or less than one flight a week. And today, airports like Belgaum, Hubli, Gulbarga, a lot of other airports in the north and northeast, they've all started seeing more than 3 to 4 to 5 flights per day. And even beyond Udan, a lot of these airports have sustained, I think 70 to 80% of the airports have still sustained, and they have more than 4 or 5 flights a day. So I think it's a fantastic proposal, and it is a fantastic scheme which looks after all the stakeholders within the ecosystem, which is airports, which is the operators as well as the customer.
Well, thank you for talking to Z News.